Mesdames et messieurs, the greatest festival of our contemporary society, the Olympic Games, is about to begin. This is going to be close.
Oh! They're all completely gassed! They've given it everything on the global bucket! Oh, yeah! Go! Oh!
Brilliant! But that is an Olympic championship.
Ready?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Keep the Flame Alive, the podcast for fans of the Olympics and Paralympics. If you love the games, we are the show for you. I am your host, Jill Jaracz, joined as always by my lovely co-host, Alison Brown. Alison, hello, how are you?
I am in excellent health. I had my physical this week.
Excellent.
But more importantly, I found out that my doctor is a pretty serious veteran fencer.
Oh, really?
And I told her I was friends with Phil Andrews, and I got such points with my doctor. Oh, I was like, yeah, I have his number in my phone. So Phil Andrews, thanks for letting me impress my doctor.
Very cool, though. That's always fun.
You know, it's so funny how the show kind of brings people out. You know, they say things you wouldn't expect.
What weapon does your doctor fence?
She used to do foil and now does épée.
Okay, very nice.
That was
Very
my
nice.
first question to her too. And she got this look on her face like, oh, you actually do know what you're talking about. And I said, yes, I do. I interviewed the entire American Olympic team. But trust me, I am not picking up a foil or an épée or a saber. I will poke your eye out.
Just because you are in excellent health does not mean you have excellent coordination.
Yeah, correct. And we know I've already burnt myself making cookies. So as I said to the American team, several of them offered to let me handle their weapon. And I said, no, you're going to the Olympics. I don't want to poke you in the eye by mistake because I definitely wouldn't defeat you. I'm not that proud of myself, but I am such a klutz.
Well, what else is excellent and not klutzy is the fact that we are coming up on episode 400.
I am so excited for this live event. And now I know I'm in
Yes.
excellent health so that I'll survive until next month.
Well, we are having a party, an online party for episode 400. It will be on Monday, July 14th at 8 p.m. Eastern, and we'll go for about 2 hours. So we're just having it like party conversation. Stop by, chat for a bit, head on out, say hello to fellow Shukflastanis, and we'll celebrate being 400 episodes, regular episodes, not including Olympic episodes and Paralympic episodes. But we will be celebrating with, I don't know, party hats.
Well, I had an idea for a cocktail
Oh,
for
you
this
did?
party. I think it needs to involve Fireball in some way.
Well,
Which is the most disgusting liquor ever created. But I think if someone can come up with the Shukflastani cocktail, it should probably involve Fireball.
I can't disagree with you. It's either
Ooh.
that or something flaming.
I was just going to say we could light it on fire.
Not in my house. You want to talk about klutz? I am not burning anything in my house.
Well, please come up with a flaming cocktail for our 400th episode party. We're excited to talk to
Right.
you.
And I would suggest maybe a flaming mocktail. You could light some sage on fire. Smell nice. You could light lavender or rosemary on fire.
There's so many
Smoke it up.
foods that we could fondue. So you have the little fire pot.
Very nice. Little s'mores action.
Yes.
Well, it's BYO everything, friends. But we do want to see you. Come on out July 14th, 8 to 10 p.m. You can find the URL to link to. It's tinyurl.com/400, the number 400 party. That's tinyurl.com/400 party. And we will see you there. Today, I'm excited about today's conversation.
You were so excited about this interview. You were excited when we booked it. You were excited when you told me about it.
Well, we are talking technology at the Olympics, and I did a little bit of research to see how long sport technology has been part of the games. ever since Athens 1896, because that was when they used the newly invented stopwatch to time athletes automatically. Since then, technology has obviously become more important to the Olympics, both on the competition side and in the delivery of the games, but there's got to be a team behind that to make it all happen. Our guest this week is IT consultant Pascal Wattiaux, who worked on Olympic technology starting at Albertville 1992. He was the IOC's director of technology for a few years, and he also consulted on London 2012 and Paris 2024. He tells us all about the tech challenges of an Olympics, and there is so much more than you may have ever realized. Take a listen. Pascal, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so I'm Pascal Wattiaux, and obviously from my accent you can guess I'm French. I've worked on the games now since 1988. That was at the time of the preparation of the Winter Olympics 92 in France. Since then, I've been working with organizing committees, with suppliers, at the IOC for a little while, on the media side as well, and most lately, I was working on Paris 24.
So, technology, when and how did you get involved with IT for sporting events?
That was in 1988. I'm an IT and telecom engineer by trade. I was then working with a service company in IT. And back in January 88, I was a manager there. I was asked to work on the response to a tender published by the organizing committee of Albertville 92. And in the end, we won that tender with almost everything we wanted to have. And I started to work in Albertville from June 88, basically. And at the time, it was very focused on IT, meaning we won a tender which was essentially focused on various information systems required for the games. And then from there, later on, I worked in Lillehammer. I mean, you may remember that 92 was the last time that the Winter Games and the Summer Games were on the same year. And because the Winter Games are, I wouldn't say they are easier, but they are smaller. So it's the Winter Games which had to engage into a shorter time to deliver the next game. And so we had the Winter Games in 92 and then again the Winter Games in 94. At the time, there was not yet any multi-edition of the game sponsors. That started with Atlanta 96. There was not yet any formal transfer of knowledge process handled by the IOC. But the organizing committee of Lillehammer approached the organizing committee of Albertville, and they had a deal, which meant that on my side, being on the supplier side, they asked me to include some people from Norway in my team in Albertville for the last, I think it was about the last 5-6 months, including the games. And then with some of the core members of my team, we went to Norway to do the initial installation and training of the people who were going to use the systems they acquired from the organizing committee of Albertville. And then I went back again a few months later to verify the installation, to answer to the last few questions, and then let them work. So that was really the beginning for me. Then later on, I mean, in 96, basically after a little piece of work for a consulting company at the IOC, I was approached by the IOC to be their, at the time, first director of technology, in the sense that before they had a manager of IT for the IOC, for the internal needs of the IOC and of the Olympic Museum in Lausanne. But they had nobody, the IOC was not really looking, if you want, at the technology delivery on the games. They thought they needed to change that. And I was approached to do that. I was in Atlanta as an observer. As you know, at the time of the games, it's also a good time to meet everybody because all the IOC members are there, all the teams of the IOC are there, the federation are there, the next organizing committees are there. So that's when I first met the people from Sydney and also from Nagano, because there was Nagano 98 in Japan. Well, Atlanta was a bit difficult from a technology perspective. I mean, there was nothing catastrophic, but there was some very serious difficulty. And so very quickly, I went back, finished my very short vacation, moved to Lausanne with my family, and then very quickly entered basically a deep debrief of Atlanta, a discussion including with the host broadcaster, with the media. The media were quite impacted in Atlanta in a negative way, and discussion with Nagano and Sydney about how to basically reorganize the process and make sure that we're not going to face the same type of challenges that they had seen, because they were there as an observer as well, they had seen in Atlanta. So that was quite intense. It was also the opening of that position at the IUC. So quickly I had somebody to take care of the IUC internal IT needs, but I had to create and start staffing a little bit what the IUC wanted to do to help on the games, starting also some processes, which some of them are still used. I mean, the technology has changed dramatically, of course, since then. Nobody wants to use the technology from that time. But some processes are still there. One well-known process is called ORIS, which is, there's nothing magic about ORIS. It stands for Olympic Results and Information Systems, but it's not a system per se. It's basically the gathering with what I would call the permanent member of the Olympic family on the games, the gathering of their requirements for the games. So it means having the IUC there, the key representative of the media, and discipline by discipline, sport by sport, the rated representative of the sport, of the International Federation, in order to put on paper what is it that they would like to do at a macro level process, not with any direction in terms of the detailed technology, but their requirements, what it is that they want, what is the response times they want, how fast the results should come out, and all that. It's absolutely normal. Anybody doing any sort of IT in any sort of company, you are asking for the requirements, but there was nothing like that on the games. And before that, it was left to the organizing committee to find out progressively how to do that. And it was sort of almost weird in the sense that the organizing committee was the only new and temporary actor in delivering the games, while the IUC obviously is permanent, the IF are basically permanent, and the media are almost permanent. But they were not saying anything. Nothing was written on paper. You couldn't have a book of requirements saying, oh, if there is 100 meter, I want to see this, and that, and I want the results to be distributed to the press agencies in that form, within X number of seconds or minutes, or and on and on. There was nothing like that, and I was not the owner of that. There was the IUC had the view that they needed to do that. In Atlanta, they did what I would call the proof of concept of the value of that with one federation, but not with any of the other ones. And when I came, I said, and effectively there were a number of problems with some of the systems around results in Atlanta. Again, no major issue in the sense that no competition had to be rerun or postponed because of that, but there were some serious problems, especially for the media. Basically, I said at the time, you started that, let's do that systematically for each discipline. I got initially the approval from the executive board of the IUC, the president of the executive board of the IUC, to do that for the Winter Games in Nagano. That was quite urgent because Atlanta to Nagano, there's only 18 months. That's fast. And then based on the fact that including during the test events in Nagano, which were, basically the winter following Atlanta, a lot of people saw the value of that. So then I got also the okay to start that for Sydney and for all the summer federation, which obviously is a lot more work, more difficult, because there are many more federations on the summer games and on the winter games, and many more disciplines. And you need a document for each discipline of a federation. It's very obvious. If I take swimming, you obviously don't do exactly the same thing for water polo or swimming or open water swimming or synchronized swimming or diving. There are similarities, but it's different. What you have to do is different. And it was a time also when the the IOC started to get involved in processes to more frequently review and actively help organizing committee to pass some hurdles and understand what they had to do and how they could resolve that with some of the partners. There's the mix of so-called top partners, usually signed for multiple edition, and local partners. And even in the case of Salt Lake City, for example, and Athens, I was even involved in helping them to find their first director of technology for the organizing committee and things like this.
So when you became director of technology, what was your staff and budget like?
At the IOC,
Yes.
at the IOC, there was nobody within the IT staff of the IOC with an experience of the games. I mean, they had been to the games, but as a spectator, they had not been working on the games. There was one exception of one person who had been working also, and he was there a long time before I was at the IOC, who had been working in Albertville, but in Albertville, he was working on the corporate systems of the organizing committee of Albertville. So not anything related to the event itself, but their financial systems, their HR system, and that, all things which are very, very important, of course, also for NOCOG and of course for the IOC. So the team had to be built from scratch on that side, and with, I would say, usual approach of the IOC, they said, well, basically they hired me initially because I think they were already thinking that there was going to be some problems in Atlanta and that they should change after a little bit their model. Then effectively there were some problems. Like I said, no major disruption, but some significant challenges in Atlanta. And so they continued there, but the IOC model, I mean, including now, with the exception of Host Broadcast, which now is included within the IOC because OBS now is a subsidiary of the IOC, which was not the case in the past. It was not the case in Sydney and Salt Lake and all that. It started a little bit. They acquired basically the company, which was owned by somebody who was systematically winning the tender for the games. He was already there for me in Albertville and on and on. So he was systematically winning. And I think basically it was a point of time where on his side he wanted to look at what's next and go and retire and all that. And he sold his company to the IOC. It was one less step for the organizing committee, because at the end he was always coming with the best proposal for the organizing committee. And so the IOC took that step, which was a significant step for them, to engage that and therefore to have the responsibility through OBS of the host broadcasting. But generally speaking, the IOC is still on the games, is still more a franchiser, a strong franchiser, strong because they are bringing some of the partners, including partners with operational responsibilities, and they're bringing part of the budget as well, with the percentage of coming from both the sponsor but also from the TV rights. So they are strong sponsors, but they don't take the responsibility to deliver. They leave it between quote, they leave it to the organizing committee and have a program which is at every edition a bit stronger and deeper and all that, but a program to initially to supervise, make sure that it's going the right way, and now more and more often to help a bit more. But on the other side, on those big events, in at least in Europe, you have your own big events in the US and all that. But in Europe, we're always comparing that to the Euro of UEFA. And UEFA, for a very long time now, they are the producer of the Euro. They also have a local organizing committee, but the local organizing committee is almost only there to first liaise with the local government for security and all that, then to be a channel for all the things related to tax that they want to facilitate, and third, to get the volunteers. But the local organizing committee for UEFA doesn't have any rights to sign any marketing contracts. They're using the IT of UEFA and on and on. And FIFA has always been a little bit in between currently going a bit more toward UEFA model, which is not a surprise considering where the current president of FIFA is coming from, and it's moving that way. They made the change now. Since the second part of the preparation of the Qatar FIFA World Cup, they have now the majority of the local organizing committee in terms of vote and all that. Well, for UEFA, it's usually at least they have at least 90%. FIFA is a bit less, but they are more present. And the IOC is looking at whether they change a little bit the balance there. In the past, without any exaggeration, I would say, at the time of Albertville, the IOC, first was a lot smaller than it is now. They almost didn't have anybody who had delivered the games within the IOC itself. And when they were visiting an organizing committee, it was almost an observation, a very light observation. There was no work on problems which the organizing committee may face and all that. Now it's a lot more cooperative, but the IOC has always been in a position where they want to be the franchisor, and they want the organizing committee, the local organizing committee, to be the producer. That comes also with some, I would say, more positive characteristic in the concept of the games, in the sense that the IOC is, and of course the 100 meter is always a 100 meter, and the 10,000 is a 10,000 and all that, but the IOC is insisting a lot more on making sure that the games have a local flavor than the UEFA with Euro or FIFA with the World Cup. From my perspective, there's always really a sense that the games are there. So the country is not just hosting the games; they give to the games a sense of the local culture, the local way of doing things, and all that, in a much stronger way than still exists in the FIFA World Cup or the UEFA Euro. Those are just two different models. You also have that with smaller events. I don't know, if you take Formula One, you have the nature of the local track, which is shaped, but also was in terms of organization, it's the same organization everywhere. And they come with their trucks and their containers, and they do what they have to do. Same thing with an event that I like very much, the Sail GP. They go back and forth with their containers to do everything. Of course, there's the local flavor related to the geography and the view you can have and all that, but the organization is exactly the same. It's more like Cirque du Soleil going from one country to another to provide the same show than with the games, where there's, from a sport perspective, it is the same show, but the IOC is leaving a lot more to the organizing committee to do and decide than on some of the other events.
Can you talk about some of the challenges and issues that Atlanta had? We know that Atlanta is a conflicting games. There were some elements that were nice, but a lot of stuff that wasn't great with those games and organizationally. What kind of things happened in the background from an IT perspective that made it tough for the stakeholders in putting them on?
I can give you one example. There was a promise made that the press agencies in particular, but also the other media, would get a feed. They would get all the results kind of automatically, and they should focus on the editorial content they wanted to build around. Now, very, very quickly, it appears that the feed was not working. So all the big press agencies had to switch to say, I have a lot of editors and all that, but in fact, I need to go and get the results here and there, because I first of all, I need those results in order to build the right content, and they had to change quite drastically their organization on the fly and change the people and completely change how they were planning to work, because the feed was not working. The feed, in the same way, for a long time, the host broadcaster, who was at the time not yet part of the IOC, but to let you know, it was difficult enough in the same way in terms of feed that initially the host broadcaster was refusing to work again with the same provider, which was impossible for the IOC because that provider had a contract until and including Sydney. So there were still 2 games to go, and the host broadcaster was refusing to do anything with that company, who within their scope of work that to deliver that. So it was that difficult.
Wow. Wow. So when you inherit this situation and also have to build in a department, what did you do and what kind of approach did you take to set
Well,
technology in a
we
better
had first of
direction?
all, we had to act quickly. I mean, I say we, it's a global we with the IUC, with the next organizing committees and all that. First with the Japanese in Nagano, because again, it was only 18 months away after Atlanta. And they were, for the first time, it was the first time there was a top sponsor involved. And part of that was that some of the key systems were supposed to go from Atlanta to Nagano, be adjusted to the winter disciplines, and that's it. But that's exactly, a good part of it was exactly where it didn't work well in Atlanta. So we had, from September, we had a very intense debriefing with the stakeholders, a very comprehensive discussion with the related partner supplier, changes in the approach to tackle Nagano, and to get everybody to agree on what to do in a matter of urgency for Nagano, so that at least already during the winter 2017, when we had a whole series of test events, well, we could get a sense that we could trust that the changes that we were implementing were putting us in the right direction. As I said, that included for all sport going through the ORIS process in a matter of urgency, because again, we wanted to have that including for the test event, so we had very little time. There was a full reorganization with some good things and bad things, as always when you reorganize, when people reorganize a team after significant incidents. But there was a significant reorganization of the team from the supplier working for Nagano, but with very good and solid involvement from the senior management of that company, and a new trust was found with Nagano. It was difficult also with Sydney. With any big contract like this, there's a framework which is imposed basically to the organizing committee by the IUC, but there's the need to localize the contract. For many, many months, Sydney was refusing to sign the localized contract. And so that meant having literally tons of meetings and negotiation and all that before finally for Sydney, the localized contract of that supplier for Sydney was effectively signed, and people were, I would say, in a better environment to work together, even if the work didn't stop completely in between, but it was very difficult. And that was it. So it's a response of a crisis for the supplier, because at the end of the day they had to acknowledge that I wouldn't say everything was wrong on their side. When you have big IT projects like that falling apart, there are usually mistakes at multiple levels, but they had their responsibilities on that. They reorganized. They made sure to bring some additional people and to put some force there. The IUC as well. To give you an example, I mentioned ORIS, but on top of ORIS, because people at the time, for me, for a little bit for weird reason, but that was the case at the time, they were not sure that it was necessary to have people with practical experience of operating some of the key systems, like around results and all that. So what we did, I got the IUC and the supplier to agree and say, okay, on my side, I believe it is necessary. It would be good for the test event that, of course, it's the local team working on that, but to have people, if they don't have people who have been working on World Championship or the seasonal World Cup of those events and all that, if they are not part of that, then let's have systematically somebody who's been doing that, including during the test events, because you have a system and all that, but then you need to react to things during a race and all that. And we reached an agreement where the IUC agreed to make an investment, the supplier agreed to do an investment, and we did 50-50. And in fact, it was, in the end, that was very good for everybody, because there was an understanding of why it was useful. And in the case of Sydney, the supplier took 100% of that additional cost, because they understood that it was effectively helping a lot to have, at least on each sport, somebody, not necessarily additional, because in some sports they already had people who had been working on that sport, but to make sure that there was every time on each sport, on each discipline, somebody who had top level international competition operating experience of that sport. Because at the end of the day, well, sport is sport. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot of by rules and all that. It's not like a banking system. I'm just saying banking because the banking and insurance are still the key areas of work of most IT companies, IT service companies. And it's not like that. It's not as black and white as that. And there's a lot of things which have to be done under the pressure of live. And then having people with the experience is pretty good. So it was all basically a matter of maturing something which is normal. But I would say the world of sport has often progressed that way. They want to have the competition, to have the top athletes and all that, very good. And unless they face the wall of a major mistake and some drama on that side, they underestimate a little bit the effort to be done on the production itself. So there was that big signal, very significant signal in Atlanta, and thanks to that, the IOC has reacted, the supplier have reacted, even the federation have reacted. It's only coming out of Atlanta that some federations which are extremely dependent on some ITs for their own events started to get their own IT managers inside their organization in order to be able at least to be a good person to discuss with the provider what has to be done, how it's done, how they should react and all that. Before Atlanta, very, very few international federation had any, call it IT director or telecom director or technology director. They didn't have that. Most of them were totally dependent on suppliers, and most of them were totally dependent on the choice of the organizer of their top event on that. So it was even further down the line. Most of them, they absolutely didn't know how their events were produced from a technology perspective. So that all changed, which is good. It doesn't mean that there's the word to keep enhancing all that, but it was a big change. And yeah, I think it's a world where some changes happen all the time, and some significant changes like that in the attitude, almost in the strategy, I would almost say, only came because there were some significant incidents which could have had some very significant impact on their business. Yeah.
Speaking of change, I want to talk a little a bit about the changes that happened technology wise throughout your career at the Olympics. And I'll preface this by saying I just saw the movie September 5th, which is about Munich 1972, and that was the first games with satellite TV. So
Yeah.
when you look at your career, like the internet came into play a lot more, but what kinds of big technology shifts did you see throughout at
Well,
each
the
games?
internet is one. The internet. There was a very limited, almost essentially corporate website, not much more than that, in Atlanta. I would say Nagano '98 were the first games with an event-oriented web presence, and Sydney were the first summer games with both the organizing committee and a number of the rights owners. So, in the US, especially NBC, starting to go very big, having a very significant web presence. And of course now it's normal and all that. There's even been some technology which have appeared during that period and disappeared. Yeah, I mean, if you think about the fact that if you've seen some photo of Atlanta and all that, there was, for all the media, there were all the famous pigeonholes and all that, where they were receiving all the results and all that. And so there were some, basically there was a printing factory inside the main press center to deliver hundreds of thousands of pages of reports constantly, and some people running to deliver that in the stands and in pigeonholes for the people staying to work at the MPC and all that. And there's still some paper, but it's reducing all the time. And obviously, at least for results, it's almost completely on the side now. Things like, in Albertville for ticketing, at the time there was no ticketing system in the world to deal with the usual various phases of ticketing for the games. There was already for the games, there was a phase during which they were selling packages where you were forced to say, oh, I want to have 10 events, but you were not choosing the events. You had a package where you had, I don't know, the men downhill and curling and all that. And there were a few put on the market, and so there was a lottery at the end. And then there was a second phase, more sport by sport, and on, until the last phase, which is more like a traditional stadium or theater type of ticketing, where you want to buy one ticket, you buy one ticket until the last minute. In the case of Albertville, at the time of Albertville, the last phase, of course, my team, that was one of the thing we won. So that's why I mentioned it as well. But for the last phase, obviously, with the organizing committee, we said, okay, well, it's no more theater type ticketing. We can buy or find an agreement to rent a system for the period of the games to do that. For everything before, we had to build that because there was nobody was even interested. There were already some big companies in the world of ticketing, but they were not interested in doing that. Nowadays, you have a number of companies which have a system like that, and with a lot of sophistication. In the FIFA World Cup, they had at some point of time you could buy tickets to follow your team, which is quite complex because obviously you don't know until when they're going to play, and depending on the first round and all that, you don't know where they're going to play and all this. But they had that. So now a number, not a huge number, not every ticketing company, but there are at least 3 or 4 very significant big companies who are able to handle the lottery, the various schemes and all that. And all that was totally non-existent at the time. Both in Albertville and in Barcelona 92, it was the first, at this time, it looks old and I'm going to be like a dinosaur here, but it was the introduction. Most of the systems were on mainframe, with so-called dumb terminals, but it was the introduction, and I will have a second example after that, even funnier, but it was the introduction of so-called client-server type of architecture, 3-tier architecture and all that. And so both Albertville separately, because two different suppliers and all that, but Albertville and Barcelona did an Info 92 and a system. In the latest edition now, it's called MyInfo, but for especially targeting the press plus the IOC members and all that, to deliver the biographies of athletes and the results and all that. At the time of Albertville and Barcelona, it was basically considered as a nice-to-have POC. So the pressure on the system was moderate in the sense that because it was a POC, if something was not really going well, if a PC, because there were PCs and all that, if the PCs was falling, of course somebody was going there to repair it or exchange it and all that. But there was very little pressure because it was more like a demonstration of what the technology was able to do at the time. Very quickly after, already in Lillehammer, obviously in Atlanta, I know that became mandatory service to the media and all that. Well, now, if you arrive now, they get all that through the web and all this, and all those kiosks are totally obsolete. I mean, there are a few of them which are put there just in case somebody is going around without a laptop and without or a tablet or a smartphone, but it's almost none. Everybody is receiving that on other devices, so that has disappeared. Even more funny, if you want to look at that, in Albertville and in Barcelona, and that was a joint project because we did that. We had part of the suppliers were distinct, but there was a central supplier which was common. So we did that in collaboration between Albertville and Barcelona. It was the first introduction of a very sophisticated nowadays system, email. First time email was being used on the games. You're impressed. I hope that you're impressed.
It is impressive when I think about, like, I first got email in college in early 1990s. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the time that there was a little bit of email there, very, quite almost difficult to use, and all of that. So we had a system because it was going to be, again, in the end of the Olympic family, plus the journalists. We had to put in place an easier front end, if you want, because not everybody is a student at university in there, and on and on. So that was it. Another change was, in Sydney. If you look at pictures of Sydney, and obviously you have the whole area of the photographers. So we can discuss the photographers a lot of time. Sydney was, I would say, essentially the last argentic photograph games being on photos. So which means that at the time, at the NPC, on top of the printing factory, we had the development factory, and on and on. And now, of course, it's all digital photos, but it's digital photos with also totally, completely different requirements. If you take a magazine like, I know they had some problems in the last few years, but like Sport Illustrated. At the times of Sydney, there were people from Sport Illustrated, they were going to Sydney, they were taking their photographs, and then after the games, they were going back to the US and print a special edition of Sport Illustrated from the US. Now, even if the frequency of the magazine is not changed, they publish real time on their website. So nowadays, like in Sydney with Argentic, but even worse because now you have your cameras can take 15, 20 photos per second and all that. And most photographers nowadays, they have, I would say, probably I don't know the average. That's not scientific what I'm going to say, but from what I've seen, they have an average, my average, the Pascal average of 3 cameras per person, of which at least 2 are robotized, and they may be robotized and on the roof, maybe robotized next to them, and they have one in their hand. Now, if you take the 100 meter, the final of the 100 meter, that's a 10-second event, more or less. The photographers are in the spot for photographers right from the beginning of the morning, while all the time it's usually at more or less at 8 or even later at night. So they are there in the morning. I think there are still photos from Sydney where you see them. There's a little bit of fighting because they want to keep their space and all that. And they take all those photos, and maybe, I don't know, I don't want to be too pessimistic, but maybe 4 or 5 of them are going to make money. No, it's still the same. Only 4 or 5 of them are making money, and each photographer, and there are hundreds of photographers, they're taking probably at least 40, 50 pictures a second of the 100 meter. So they want to have a super duper connection. The connection has changed. For a while, they moved from the argentic to say, I want to be connected. And so initially they were among the first ones to use Wi-Fi. Then Wi-Fi started to be used everywhere. So it was no longer possible to ensure them that they would have a good performance on it. So they asked to have cable and fiber basically to the pitch for them. And now it's a mix of fiber to the pitch and a private 5G network.
Wow, that gets involved then, like, especially from a cost perspective too. The needs of technology have so changed. When you think about IT innovation for games, when do you start talking about what can you implement, and when do you have to stop talking about what new things you can implement? Because the games has a deadline and it's only a couple weeks long, so it's not like you can try something new and fix it.
Yeah, for each edition, that's a big challenge for each edition. In the terms that I always say the date is the date. There's many things you can negotiate and all that. And well, now we have the exception of Tokyo because of COVID, but everybody has understood that costing a ton of money, and probably Japan was one of the only country who could have accepted that because of their culture and what they wanted to do and all that. So the date is the date. So within an organizing committee, you need to have a process in place because everybody is coming with tons of ideas, and everybody thinks that the Olympic Games, it's not only the Olympics for the athletes, but it's the Olympics for their own function. So they want the best possible accommodation, the best services, the best that, and on and on. And you have to play a little bit hard, and especially with the time, because one, it's costing, two, there's time, and three, there's so much pressure on the games that if you don't have enough time and enough budget and all that, it probably means that you're arriving late, it's not tested thoroughly and all that. And the pressure on the games is such that I can tell you anything that has not been tested, you're sure it's going to fail. Things which have been tested may still fail, but what has not been tested is going to fail. So if it's core to the delivery, you have to be very, very careful. If it's not core, it doesn't mean that you want it to fail, but if it's a service for a limited number of people, whether it's the VIPs or this or that, you can organize, you can even communicate that, hey, it's a POC, let's do that, and it's not too important. But if it's core, things which have not been tested will fail. There's just too much pressure, too much intensity everywhere. And so that there's edition by edition, there's always some difficult moments where people wanted to do this and wanted to do that. It didn't come to fruition, it's not finished and all that, and you have to say, no, it's not there. The worst thing is to say, no, it's not there. Or again, you can mitigate and say, okay, it's going to be there, but we're going to communicate that it's not there as a core service. And so it's there under lower service level. We tell the people it can fail. They shouldn't feel that they are sure that they're going to have it. We may say it's a demonstration. I mean, we can say a number of things in a very positive way. But you have to be very careful to say, people, if they come to the games and they are told you're going to have that, if that is not working well enough, then you get hammered, literally hammered.
How much time and resources do you have to spend on cybersecurity now compared to earlier in your career?
It keeps growing. It keeps getting more and more expensive. It keeps getting tougher and tougher. I mean, Paris was lucky in some ways not to have to face any drastic challenge with that, but because we spent a lot in the preparation, and then there was probably some, including some international context where people were doing what they wanted to do there elsewhere than in Paris. So in some way, it looks like we were less of a target than we thought we could be. It doesn't mean that nothing has happened, but considering the tremendous amount of effort, which is, for the time being, it's without any end, it's growing from each edition to the next one. So we've been spending a lot on that. Los Angeles will spend even more, and in between Milano and all that. But with that, it was basically completely contained in Paris, which is good. As you know, there were some changes in some of the previous games related to that. So, but it is difficult, and it is even more and more difficult in the sense that, again, that's another change from the past. In the past, on the web, so the web, as I said, was it only started basically a little bit in a very, very small way with Atlanta. At the time, the worst thing you could have was to have your website defaced. Nowadays, I don't mean that having the website defaced is not nice, but first, it was not really core in terms of service, and second, it's only that. Now, it's affecting absolutely everything, including because all the workforce, all the suppliers and all that, they all want to be able to work from their smartphones, their tablets, their laptop, and all that. So the attacks are direct. Some of the attacks, and a larger and larger amount of the attacks, are targeted toward creating disruption in the production of the games. Not necessarily just, between quote, on the finished product of the games, like the website, but on the organization itself, on the production of that. And that's becoming more and more difficult because everybody is equipped now. Everybody wants to access everything from everywhere. On top of that, in a very sound way, we're looking more and more at using either existing venues or temporary venues. Right? Temporary venues, we have to put our infrastructure anyway, but in existing venue. So in existing venue, if you aim to use the infrastructure of an existing venue, you have to make it secure as well. And most of the time, it's a different vendors in it, different organization and all that. And everything is not standardized and all that. So it's difficult. And it's going down to even things like you can think that, a lot of, I give you a very simple example. A lot of cities now, they have lighting in the streets organized with a system and all that. And as a matter of fact, a number of cities have been hacked on that and all this. Now, on the games, we have a town, you can call it a town, that's called the Olympic Village. Even if it's not lethal, you don't want somebody to start playing with the lights in the Olympic Village or to start playing with the sensors which are telling you what is the level of the various gas in the village, because you can create significant disruption with that. I'm not even talking about the lifts and all this, but even just with that, there's no real lethal attack on anybody there, but it can be extremely disruptive. I mean, it was the case in Paris, it's the case in many cases. It's built or it's already partially built, like it's the case in the US and again in Los Angeles for 28, but it's part of something which is managed in a different way. And so suddenly the security of the village organized to be a part of a city, or in the case of the US, of a university and all that, we have to change that. And it's not that easy to change. You have to change that from the perspective of all the automation you can find. You have to change that from the perspective of the CCTV, because maybe, if it's in a quarter of a city, like it was the case in Paris, well, when it's a quarter of the city, the CCTV is going outside to some police center thing. During the games, no, we want that to go to the specific security area to manage the games, including because we don't want somebody in the local town to organize and say, oh, you can come at the town hall and you will see how the athletes are living in the village. So we have to make sure that we can direct all the video flows to the right place and and that they don't go somewhere else. So it doesn't get any easier from that perspective. It's not visible. It's not like somebody breaking a record on the field and all that, but it doesn't get any easier. And it doesn't get any easier also because and that's also a big change from back in the early 90s to now. Nowadays, a lot of the technology that you're using has been at least first introduced as a consumer product. And it's very rare that it's hardened even for corporation, and even less often that it's hardened for very abrasive contexts like the games. And that's one of the problems quite often with companies coming with new products and all that. Yeah, I mean, the product is great. Yes, there are some nice functions and all that, but no, it has not been hardened. And again, if it has not been hardened, there's such an intense cyber war during the games that you're sure it's going to be destroyed. And so some people are not happy with that. And it's a very delicate balance to find, because you at the very same time, you want to be able to introduce that, because it's very, very difficult. Don't even think about the spectators. For the organization, people are used to work nowadays with their smartphone every day, everywhere, and this and that. And suddenly you have to explain to them that, hey, in the case of the games, it's going to be very difficult because it's not hardened enough from a cybersecurity perspective. And you have to use this and use that and all that. And you have a lot of pushback. And so you have to find, you have to educate a lot of people, and you have to find solution early enough and get them to use them and have them not to be too difficult to use. But sometimes people are saying, oh, you're using old things. Well, people don't work like that now. No, they don't work like that when they are not under the microscope and they're not attacked like we are attacked every day. And that's very, very difficult. it was the same. I saw that even with something as simple as Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, it came in the world of everybody. After a little while, everybody got that at home. Even when people were getting that at home, and it's still the case now, when you go to a hotel, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not that good. Sometimes it's good if you are in the hotel between 10 and 11 in the morning, when everybody have left and nobody has come back. But when everybody is there, and if on top of that the business center is working and all that, it can be pretty bad. But some hotels have fixed it. Now, if you want to fix it for everybody, it's still extremely difficult and expensive. And on top of that, on the games, even though Wi-Fi is working on non-regulated frequencies, there's so much equipment, so many possibilities of interferences and all that, that we make them regulated during the games. So that's an additional process that we have to have, and we get that regulated by the people, and we get people to police that, to stop people from using it, stop people from, nowadays everybody from a smartphone, you can open a hotspot. Well, depending where you are, what is your telephone and all that, you can create interferences. Not all the time. Sometimes it goes well. Sometimes it doesn't go well. And it's very difficult to get people to accept to stop their hotspot. But we have to do that very regularly because there's not enough separated frequencies anywhere to support everything that everybody wants to do without any cable. So, again, for many people, it looks like it's a bit anti-progressive, but the reality is that the spectrum is big, but it's finished. And there's so many equipment that we cannot accept all the equipment. And we have to make the police, including during the operation of the games.
Was Y2K and that idea of a Y2K bug, was that something that Sydney was worried about?
Yeah, they were, and they had specific work being done on that. They were not really for the game systems, but for the various systems embedded in the infrastructure on a number of stadiums and all that. So yeah, they had a specific workforce who had done a lot of work to get to the point where a number of things were done and they were comfortable that it was enough. No, it was there. Yeah, absolutely. No, but Sydney was great in the sense that, including, that happened at every game. But if you take what I think is one of the nowadays of the beautiful competition that everybody or a lot of people like, even if they don't practice the sport or are not very sporty, like triathlon. Sydney was the first Olympic triathlon. And it was tough. I mean, it's during the process of Sydney being there that the IOC accepted the application of the ITU to be there. And of course, it was a new sport, complex sport, with 3 disciplines, all outdoor, distance and all that. And it was at the point of time where even within the world of triathlon, the Olympic triathlon was not considered a real sport because they were used already to the Ironman. And the reference was the Ironman. And it's still a reference, it's still a big thing. But now the smaller distance and all that, there are even smaller distance than the Olympic distance now. But the boom of that sport, based on traditional sport in some way, swimming and cycling and running, but it's tremendous. It's tremendous, and it's outdoor, and it's providing, it's a great support for the part of the organizing committee and the city and the country to show the outdoor. Remember, maybe, I don't know, the images, of course, of Sydney, but even of London, of Paris, of the triathlon, of Rio, and all of that. It's one of the top summer sport now in terms of the people looking at it and all that, and embracing it and going on site. Of course, because it's long distance, not long distance from a triathlon perspective, because it's not an Ironman. It's not even now they have triple Ironman and all this, but it's relatively long distance compared to anything else. So it means that there's a lot of the public, like for the marathon, where it's free tickets and all that. That has been the start of the integration of more outdoor sport in a formula which can be felt as more accessible, because the Ironman it's great. I mean, I think it's fantastic. But a lot of people think very quickly, it's not for me. Because, when the Ironman, you finish with a marathon. And most people have already a big problem doing a marathon by itself. So thinking about swimming before and cycling and all that, still for a lot of people, it's beyond the horizon. They may be interested, but it's not for them. That level of stress, I mean, of course, they don't want to do the performance and all that, but it became a little bit, from that perspective, like the half marathon in cities and all that, where there are more and more participants and on and on. And the production, it did help a lot in modernizing the outdoor production to have that additional event.
Excellent. Well, Pascal, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us and shedding light on the world of IT in the Olympics, because it's something we definitely all rely on now. And when you think about the amount of work it takes, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's a nice place to be. I mean, that's why I always liked working internationally and having that opportunity and all that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pascal. You can find Pascal on LinkedIn and follow him there. He is Pascal W. We'll have a link to that in the show notes.
Oh, sono belle.
Oh, so nice. Milan-Cortina news for this week. Milo and Tina plush toys are for sale, which is very exciting. They're very, very cute.
They
Online.
really came out nice as a toy.
Yes. You can buy them online, except for if you are in North America, Russia, Belarus, China, Iran, Syria, and Cuba. They will not ship to those countries. I feel like the bad kid who got put into the court, gets sent to the principal's office with a whole bunch of other bad kids.
Well, considering the company that we've been put in.
Right. I wonder if tariffs have anything to do with that.
Probably.
So,
but the Canadians even got smacked into this group.
Maybe it's just too hard to ship here for some stuff. I don't know.
Friends elsewhere, please get me a Milo and Tina.
Well, you'll hopefully get them in person.
I'll probably just collect them. I love these two.
Yeah. And the flow.
And the flow.
Other big news this week, hockey schedules have been announced. So this is very, very exciting. And everybody who has hockey tickets is now frantically trying to figure out when their teams are playing. For the women, there are 2 groups of 5. Group A is going to be Canada, USA, Finland, Czechia, and Switzerland. Group B is Japan, Sweden, Germany, Italy, and France. That's a heavy hitting Group A right there. That's all I have to say. This is going to be a tough one to get out of. USA and Canada are doing a 4-game rivalry series in the lead up to the games. They'll be in Cleveland on November 6th, Buffalo on November 8th, and then they move up to Canada for 2 games in December with dates to be determined. We'll have a link to that in the show notes if you would like to try to catch them ahead of the Olympics. The men, which has been news everywhere because NHL pro players are back in the games. They have 3 groups because they have 12 teams versus the women's 10. Group A is Canada, Switzerland, Czechia, and France. Group B is Finland, Sweden, Slovakia, Italy. And Group C is USA, Germany, Latvia, and Denmark. And the first 6 players for each team have been named. 8 teams named 6 current NHL players. 2 teams had 5 NHL players. I don't understand this.
So what that means is that of the 12 teams, 8 of them have 6 NHL players on them, and 2 more have 5 NHL players. Only France and Italy have no NHL players.
So far.
But I'm not really sure they will.
Well, maybe somebody is frantically trying to get citizenship. Sidney Crosby is going to be on his 3rd Olympic squad for Canada. I'm so excited. When I saw his name, I'm like, ooh, he's been around a long time. This is going to be good.
And on the American team, we've got the first set of brothers, which is very important to us because it's the Chuk brothers, and they are TKACHUK.
Oh, right.
But they have a silent T, which is apparently the Ukrainian pronunciation.
Oh, okay. So it's Kachuk while we're shook.
Right.
Okay. Well, I wonder if we will to catch them at the Team USA Media Summit.
And how many times will they call them Keith by mistake, which is their father, who played when I was really actively watching hockey?
Oh, this will be fun. If they even get back to the podcast table, that's going to be the fun bit.
Oh my God, if the Kachuk brothers show up, I will be so excited.
Other news, athlete-wise, the reigning men's ski halfpipe gold medalist has opted to not defend his gold medal at Milano-Cortina. This is New Zealander Nico Porteous. He said he is not retiring, but he intends to focus his skiing on filming and product development instead. So you will see a new gold medalist this year.
Go Silver Ferns.
Got to put this on my list. We have no World Games. World Games news. With 50 days to go, Chill still hasn't found music for the World Games, but they have released their medals.
And they look like pandas.
I know, this was so funky when I saw it. They are shaped like panda heads with little ears. I mean, they're gold, silver, and bronze, but they have panda ears to them and look
So
like a panda.
it's a big circle with two little semicircles on the edges.
Yes. And bamboo motif on the front side, and the reverse features a hibiscus flower motif, which is the city flower of Chengdu, host city, and the inscriptions are in English and Chinese. So we'll put a picture of this up on the show notes, and it's really funky. I will say that.
I've never seen a medal like this with this sort of satellite pieces, though I worry they'll break off. But it is, I mean, immediately you look at it and you think panda.
Yes,
which
definitely.
is great.
Yeah.
Welcome to CKFLASTAN.
It is the time of the show where we check in with our team Keep the Flame Alive. These are past guests and listeners of the show who make up our citizenship of our very own country, CKFLASTAN. First up,
Karate Tom Scott won gold in male kumite under 75 kilogram division at the 2025 Pan American Karate Foundation Senior Championships.
Archer Casey Kuffold won bronze in the individual recurve event and gold in the team women's team recurve event at the Archery World Cup in Antalya, Turkey.
Swimmer Bobby Fink won gold in the 400-meter individual medley and the 800-meter and 1,500-meter freestyle at the USA Swimming National Championships. Bobby has announced that he will only compete in the freestyle events at the World Championships next month in Singapore.
He's been cleaning up lately.
He is not fooling around.
Right? There are a lot of swimmers who are not fooling around from Team USA.
I know, new world record for Katie Ledecky 9 years after she set the world record in this race.
Incredible. Para-triathlete Grace Norman took gold at the World Triathlon Para-Series event in Taranto, Italy. Grace will also be part of the U.S. Paralympic cycling team competing in the 2025 UCI Paracycling Road World Championships in August in Belgium. Also on that team are Samantha Bosco and Dennis Connors.
At the USA Shooting Nationals, Marco Della Rosa finished second in the P1 10-meter air pistol men's SH1, and Mary Tucker finished third in the women's 10-meter air rifle and fifth in the women's 50-meter three position. Tim Sherry finished fifth in men's 10-meter air rifle, sixth in men's 50-meter three position, and fourth in men's 50-meter prone.
This is one of those sports, like we talked to Tim Sherry a long time ago now, and like, oh, he's still competing. This is pretty good. But I mean, shooters can compete for a long, long time. Speaking of shooters, at the ISF World Cup in Munich last week, Sejan Madalena finished fourth in the women's 50-meter rifle three positions, and then she teamed up with Peter Matthew Fiore for the 10-meter air rifle mixed team. They qualified for the bronze medal match, but took fourth.
At the ICF Canoe Slalom World Cup at La Seu d'Urgell, Spain, Evie Liepvaarth made it to the quarterfinals of the women's kayak cross and did not get beyond the heats in the women's kayak or women's canoe events. The tour moved on to Pau, France last week, where once again she got into the quarterfinals of kayak cross, took sixth in canoe and fourth in kayak.
Geologist Derek Long has obtained his PhD in mineral deposits and Precambrian geology for the Harquail School of Earth Sciences at Laurentian University, and he has accepted a tenure track assistant professor position in critical minerals at the University of Regina in Canada, and just in time so he can focus on watching curling at Milano-Cortina.
That's Dr. Derek to you.
That's right, Dr. Derek.
Congratulations to fencer Lauren Scruggs for graduating from Harvard University last month. Also, Lauren and Lee Kiefer have been named to Team USA's World Championship team in women's foil.
Bobsled Bree Walker made an appearance as a guest quizmaster on the television show. Have you been paying attention?
If you don't get a chance to watch this, you will be sorry. She's
Okay.
funny,
Is she?
funny.
Okay, we will have a link to that in the show notes as well.
Weightlifters Jordan Dela Cruz and Hampton Morris will be competing at the USA Weightlifting National Championships next week.
A lot on the docket.
No wonder I'm tripping. I'm having trouble tripping over words. And as we said at the beginning of the show, uncoordinated, even with my mouth.
Oh, but, at least excellent health, which is everything we want. And that is going to do it for this episode. Let us know what you think about technology used at the Olympics.
And we do love hearing from you. You can chat with us and other listeners on our Facebook group, Keep the Flame Alive Podcast. Email us at flamealivepod@gmail.com. The voicemail and text line is always open at 208-352-6348. That's 208-FLAME-IT. And if you need more Olympics and Paralympics in your life, and who doesn't, sign up for our newsletter at flamealivepod.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes.
Oh, next week, get ready for this because we're in primetime Grand Slam time for tennis. So I've been binging tennis like crazy. And Wimbledon is coming up. We will be having a discussion about wheelchair tennis with boys champion Charlie Cooper, who will be competing at Wimbledon. He's gunning for LA 2028. So let's get another Shukistani on board that hopefully we'll be able to cheer on in a few years. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, keep the flame alive.